Hey guys, tonight we're going to take a deep dive into the peculiar, often strange, but surprisingly practical tools used by 16th century apothecaries. Picture yourself walking into a bustling shop in a small medieval town. The air is thick with the smell of herbs, spices, and something faintly medicinal. Perhaps it's the musky scent of dried plants hanging from the rafters, or the rich, pungent odor of alcohol used for tinctures. You step over wooden floors creaking underfoot. The shelves are lined with glass jars and small vials, each containing an elixir or concoction whose effects might be a little mysterious. The walls are covered in scrolls of handwritten recipes, some practical, others borderline magical. You probably won't survive this without a little help, as medieval medicine was a dangerous and uncertain art. Yet these apothecaries were the trusted healers of their time. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and feel free to drop your location and the time there. Let's see where everyone is tuning in from. Now dim the porting that's itty dashin. Lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Let's start with the apothecary's shop itself. You're standing in a room filled with a dizzying array of items. There are long wooden counters stacked high with jars containing all kinds of substances, herbs, roots, and powders you might not recognize. The floors are a patchwork of worn wood and straw, and the shop is filled with the faint hum of activity. Customers coming and going, a bit of murmured conversation, and the ever-present sound of a mortar and pestle grinding something into powder. The apothecary is a bit of an enigma. A figure who blends practical knowledge with strange rituals. He or she knows how to brew potions that can soothe a cough or heal a wound, but might also dabble in alchemy or the occult. It wasn't just about creating medicines to heal ailments, though. That was only part of the job. Apothecaries were also trusted with more than a few odd remedies. As you watch, a customer walks up to the counter and hands over a small vial. It's filled with a thick, dark liquid that smells oddly of burnt sugar. The apothecary nods, takes the vial, and tells the customer that the concoction will help their digestion, or will it? Some of the remedies they concocted were borderline questionable, sometimes using strange, often animal-based ingredients like bat wings or toads. But in an age where medical knowledge was still in its infancy, people trusted the apothecaries to fix what ailed them, even if they didn't entirely understand how. Now, as we're easing into this world of medieval healing, one of the most iconic tools in the apothecary's shop is the mortar and pestle. It's a simple yet indispensable instrument that's been in use for centuries. Picture it: a heavy stone bowl, often carved with intricate designs, and a pestle usually made of the same material resting beside it. The apothecary picks it up with familiarity, grinding herbs into fine powders, blending oils and mashing roots to create concoctions for everything from curing headaches to soothing sore throats. It's a tool of both art and science, with a rhythm to its use that is soothing, almost hypnotic, as you hear the rhythmic thud, thud, thud of the pestle against stone. It's not just for grinding down ingredients for medicines, but also for mixing complex potions, tinctures, and balms. You can almost smell the earthy aroma of the herbs as they're ground, filling the air with a sharp herbal fragrance. Historians still argue whether the mortar and pestle was the first tool used for preparing medicinal ingredients in the 16th century, or whether it was an innovation of earlier apothecaries passed down from ancient civilizations. What we do know is that it became absolutely essential in the apothecary's work. With it, they could prepare remedies for everything from treating fevers with crushed chamomile flowers to creating medicinal pastes for wounds. The apothecary might add a bit of water or oil to turn the powder into a paste, or mix it with alcohol to create a tincture. It was one of the few tools they relied on for nearly every task, from mixing up something to soothe the stomach, preparing treatments for more serious ailments, and even in modern-day pharmacies. This trusty tool has maintained its place in some form, albeit with a more polished, mechanized version. But here's the kicker: the mortar and pestle wasn't just about precision and practicality. It also had a bit of mystique surrounding it. After all, not all the things apothecaries concocted were just herbal medicines. Some potions were believed to have magical qualities drawn from secret texts or alchemical recipes. Maybe the apothecary was trying to brew up something more than just a remedy. Maybe they were hoping to unlock the secrets of life or the universe, creating potions that could change the very fabric of existence. To be fair, there was a fine line between medicine and magic in the 16th century, and the mortar and pestle played a role in both worlds. Who's to say the apothecary didn't toss a pinch of fairy dust or dragon's blood into their mix just for good measure? In this world, everything was possible. You can almost imagine the apothecary muttering under their breath as they grind their latest batch of elixir, a tincture that promises to cure nearly everything from a common cold to a broken heart. Of course, the science behind it was limited at best, but the belief in these potions ran deep. And this simple, humble tool, the mortar and pestle, was the key to it all. Now that you're familiar with the rhythmic, almost hypnotic process of grinding herbs and mixing powders, let's move on to another key tool of the 16th century apothecary, the distillation apparatus. Imagine a long winding glass tube, twisted and bent into intricate loops and coils, attached to a large copper or glass flask. The apothecary holds a small fire beneath it, gently heating a mixture of herbs, alcohol, and water. The goal: to separate the essential oils and medicinal vapors from the raw ingredients, using the heat to transform the liquids into vapor, which then condenses back into liquid form, usually into a separate container. It's a mesmerizing .com process full of bubbling sounds and faint smells of herbs, flowers, and sometimes less pleasant things. The air might smell of lavender and rosemary, or if the recipe calls for it, the sharper scent of juniper, or even rose petals. This is where apothecaries became more than just herbalists, they were alchemists. While the distillation process was grounded in practical science, it also had an air of mystery and magic to it. Apothecaries weren't just creating medicines. They were harnessing the very essence of plants and herbs, distilling their soul, so to speak, into concentrated form. Some of these potions, when properly distilled, were far more potent than any simple herb decoction. They could cure, they could heal, and in some cases they could even harm, depending on the apothecary's skill or lack thereof. Historians still argue about how much ancient alchemical practices influenced the apothecaries of the 16th century. Some scholars suggest that apothecaries were simply continuing the work of medieval alchemists who sought to turn base metals into gold or find the elixir of life. Others point out that distillation was a natural progression of medieval science, a tool of practical medicine that had been refined over generations. Whatever the case, the distillation apparatus was one of the apothecary's prized possessions. It required skill, patience, and sometimes a bit of trial and error, but the rewards were worth it. Beautiful, potent oils and tinctures that could be used for everything from soothing a cough to preserving the skin. There were plenty of risks involved, of course. Working with fire and boiling liquids wasn't the safest practice, and accidents happened more than once. An apothecary would blow up their own distillation apparatus, sending glass shards flying. But that was all part of the process. If they were lucky, the apothecary would emerge from the chaos with a new elixir to add to their collection. If not, they'd simply try again, adjusting their techniques, fine-tuning the heat, swapping out herbs. Distillation wasn't an exact science, and some of the most famous medicinal elixirs came from years of trial and error, often with surprising results. But the most intriguing part of distillation was the result. When an apothecary successfully distilled a potion or oil, they'd capture something far more concentrated than the raw plant material. These distillates could be used right, think rose oil or lavender water, but they could also be mixed into other concoctions for healing perfume. Or even in the case of the more magical-minded apothecaries, for casting spells. The world of apothecaries wasn't just grounded in healing. It was steeped in mystery, in the belief that the right mix of herbs and oils could cure, protect, or even unlock the mysteries of the universe. You can almost picture the apothecary holding up a flask of their latest distilled creation, watching the light play off the glass. The rich golden liquid inside, shimmering in the candlelight. They might smile to themselves, knowing that they've just created something both magical and practical. Distillation was the secret that unlocked the most powerful medicines of the time, and sometimes, just a little bit of magic. As the apothecary continues their work surrounded by tools of both science and art, it's time to take a closer look at those mysterious glass bottles that seem to be everywhere. The glass bottles, jars, and vials were more than just containers. For the apothecary's medicines, they were symbols of their craft. Each one was carefully selected, often imported from distant lands, and each had a specific purpose. Some were small and delicate, used for storing essential oils or elixirs, while others were larger, used for preserving herbal tinctures or medicinal spirits. The apothecary's shelves were lined with these glass vessels, each one holding a piece of the apothecary's vast knowledge and skill. Historians still debate whether the apothecary's use of glass bottles was purely practical, or if there was a deeper symbolic meaning to them. On one hand, these bottles helped preserve the contents within, protecting them from the air, light, which could degrade the potency of the herbs and oils. On the other hand, the very fact that the bottles were often made of glass, an expensive material, could be seen as a reflection of the apothecary's knowledge and status. Only those who could afford to import glass from Venice or other glass-making centers could truly call themselves skilled apothecaries. Some of these bottles were quite beautiful, with intricate designs or colored glass reflecting the spirit, apothecary's expertise and taste. The glass bottles weren't just functional. They were works of art in their own right, but the true magic of the apothecary's bottles came when they were filled with their concoctions. Some bottles contained sweet-smelling perfumes made from roses or jasmine, while others held bitter tinctures made from herbs like wormwood, used to treat digestive issues. There were bottles filled with strange, sometimes gruesome-sounding substances, snake oil, bat wings, and the like. The bottles themselves were often labeled, though not always in the most legible script. Apothecaries had their own system of symbols and abbreviations, sometimes a bit cryptic, to identify the contents. If you weren't an apothecary reading, those labels might have been a challenge. But for those in the know, those bottles were A. Shorthand for the vast array of remedies the apothecary could provide. One of the more interesting debates among historians is whether these glass bottles were used as much for their magical symbolism as for their practical use. In an age when medicine and magic were often intertwined, these glass vessels could have been seen as magical in and of themselves. The apothecary wasn't just creating medicines, they were creating potions, and the glass bottle was the container that held that magic. Perhaps the apothecary even believed that the act of distilling a potion and placing it in a glass bottle somehow infused the remedy with power. Whether it was the careful process of distillation, or the thought then to selecting the right glass container, the apothecary's bottles were more than just functional tools. They were magical vessels meant to hold not just medicine but something much more. You might imagine the apothecary carefully selecting a bottle, one that feels just right in their hands, and filling it with their latest brew. Perhaps they take a moment to admire the way the light shines through the bottle, illuminating the rich color of the liquid inside. The work isn't just about creating something useful, it's about the artistry of it. The apothecary is a craftsman, and their bottles are the canvas for their work. There's a sense of pride that comes with each bottle, knowing that it holds the potential to heal, to soothe, or maybe even to perform a bit of magic. As the apothecary moves from their shelves of glass bottles to the table where they carefully arrange their ingredients, the next tool we encounter is perhaps one of the most peculiar: the crocodile dung. Yes, you heard that right. Now, you probably didn't expect that to be part of the apothecary's toolkit, did you? But let me assure you, it was used for more than just a strange form of humor. In the 16th century, crocodile dung was one of the more common and bizarre ingredients in the apothecary's repertoire. You might wonder why anyone would willingly use something so unappealing. Well, in the world of medieval medicine, nothing was too weird to be experimented with, especially when it came to remedies for the plague or other widespread illnesses. Historians still argue about the precise uses of crocodile dung. Some say it was applied as a poultice for wounds. Others claim it was mixed into certain potions. Regardless, it became a staple ingredient for apothecaries looking to try any and every possible treatment. You could almost hear the apothecary's voice now. What's the worst that happen? It might work. This use of unconventional materials wasn't just restricted to crocodile dung either. The idea that the animal world could provide medicinal or protective properties was a common belief. Apothecaries used all sorts of animal-based ingredients from bird feathers to snakeskin in their concoctions. For many, this was seen as part of a larger worldview that believed animals held the key to unlocking hidden secrets of health and life. A bit of bird saliva here, a dash of bat wings there. Medieval medicine was a wild ride, to say the least. Now imagine the apothecary as they stand over a mixing table, their hands deftly adding powdered crocodile dung to a mortar. The smell is no doubt something that would make you question the practicality of medieval remedies. But in the eyes of the apothecary, this was just another day at the office, mixing, grinding, and testing out whatever strange idea they had for curing illness. Even if you could find a shred of logic behind using such oddities, it still wouldn't make it much more palatable. But for the people seeking relief from deadly illnesses like the plague, there was little room for hesitation. If it worked, it worked. Historians still argue whether these strange remedies had any merit. Was the crocodile dung just another sign of how desperate times had become? Or was there a faint hope that these bizarre cures might actually hold some medicinal value? There's a theory that some of these ingredients, when prepared in the right way, might have had antibacterial properties, or perhaps they were just part of a larger, ritualistic process that helped patients feel more hopeful. The idea that medicine was as much about belief and psychology as it was about science was very much alive in the 16th century. You can almost picture the scene: the apothecary carefully measuring the dung, taking the time to ensure the perfect balance, and then mixing it into a bowl with oils, herbs, and perhaps a dash of something else strange. The process is meticulous, a bit chaotic, and depending on how you look at it, either a fascinating glimpse into early experimentation or a reminder of just how far medicine has come since then. With the peculiar use of crocodile dung in mind, let's shift our focus to another important but equally strange tool in the apothecary's collection: the animal part ingredients. In an era where the lines between medicine, magic, and superstition often blurred, the inclusion of animal parts in medicinal preparations was quite common. If you've ever heard of the phrase like cures like, this principle was alive and well in the 16th century. In the apothecary's world, the idea that certain animal parts held magical or healing properties was taken very seriously. So it's no surprise that parts of animals, everything from bones to blood to fat, were frequently used in potions, salves, and even surgical treatments. Imagine walking into the apothecary's shop and spotting jars filled with strange preserved animal parts. You might see a jar of snakeskin drying out near a shelf of dried herbs, or perhaps tucked away in a corner, you spot a jar of bat wings. These were considered powerful ingredients for treating various ailments, including coughs, asthma, and even anxiety. For an apothecary, these were not just strange curiosities. They were essential components of their craft. Some believed that by using these parts they could harness the strength, vitality, or mystical properties of the animal itself. Historians still argue about the exact reasoning behind this practice. Was it just superstition or folklore? Or did the apothecaries in their own way recognize that certain compounds in animal parts might have medicinal properties? Take the properties, fat of a bear, for example. Some believed it could be used to treat joint pain or perhaps as a balm for burns. The theory was that the animal's strength or healing abilities would transfer to the person who used it. But as you can imagine, this wasn't just limited to the more common animals we think of today. The 16th century apothecary might have also used things like lizard blood for its supposed cooling properties, owl feathers for their calming effect, and even spider venom in small amounts, of course, to treat infections. At the time, these ingredients weren't considered weird or out of place. They were simply part of the accepted body of knowledge that apothecaries had. It wasn't uncommon to find a mixture of crushed beetles in a healing ointment or powdered bull's horn to strengthen the heart. Picture the apothecary hunched over their workbench, grinding these strange, often bizarre ingredients into fine powders. The air is thick with the smell of herbs and animal products, a mixture of earthiness and something almost metallic as The apothecary works, they might offer you one of their latest concoctions, promising it will help with a variety of symptoms. You might hesitate, but they reassure you. It's all natural after all. After years of practice, these recipes were seen as proven remedies passed down from generation to generation. Some of these practices may sound far-fetched by modern standards, but for the people of the 16th century, these were legitimate treatments. They had no idea about germs or bacteria. What they knew was what worked, at least some of the say, time. The apothecary's knowledge of animal parts and their supposed benefits was grounded in both ancient traditions and personal experimentation. It's easy to see why these tools and ingredients fascinated so many. The apothecary wasn't just a healer. They were a kind of magician, a keeper of ancient knowledge, and a master of mixing both the mystical and the practical. With a pinch of bat wings and a dash of crocodile dung, anything seemed possible. And in the minds of those seeking treatment, the apothecary was often their last best hope. As we move through the apothecary's shop surrounded by jars filled with the remnants of animals, herbs, and potions, we come to another tool that's deeply intertwined with both the apothecary's craft and their more mystical inclinations: alchemy. Now you might be thinking, wasn't alchemy just a precursor to chemistry? And the answer is, well, yes and no. Alchemy in the 16th century was a blend of experimental science, philosophy, and mysticism. Apothecaries, many of whom were also part-time alchemists, didn't just brew medicines, they sought to transform the very essence of materials, trying to change one substance into another. The most famous example of this was the alchemist's dream of turning base metals like lead into gold. But there was more to alchemy than just the pursuit of wealth. Alchemists believed they could unlock the secrets of life itself. Imagine the apothecary's workbench, perhaps a little less tidy now, as it's cluttered with ancient scrolls and half-finished glass vessels, some filled with bubbling liquids. A faint scent of sulfur fills the air. You hear the soft clinking of metal tools and the hiss of a mixture being heated. At first glance, it may seem like any other work in the apothecary's shop. But as the apothecary leans over their flask, carefully watching the reaction, there's a touch of something mystical in the air. They're not just brewing a remedy. They might be attempting to transmute substances, searching for the philosopher's stone, the mythical substance that could turn any metal into gold and grant immortality. Historians still debate how much of the apothecary's work in alchemy was practical versus truly mystical. For some, alchemy was the beginning of modern chemistry. The tools they developed, like distillation apparatuses and complex laboratory equipment, laid the groundwork for chemical experimentation. For others, alchemy was deeply tied to the belief in magic, the spiritual world, and even divine intervention. The apothecary may have believed that by mixing the right ingredients in the right way, they could create more than just medicine. They could unlock the secrets of the universe itself. The tools used by apothecaries who dabbled in alchemy were often a bit more advanced than the simple mortar and pestle. Think of flasks, crucibles, and retorts. Intricate glass vessels used to heat, cool, and distill chemicals. These tools were both functional and symbolic. They represented the apothecary's ability to manipulate the natural world to change one thing into another. For example, the use of a retort, a glass vessel with a long neck, would allow the apothecary to distill liquids, transforming raw materials into more refined substances. Whether it was for a potion, a salve, or some more alchemical goal, retort was an essential tool in the apothecary's quest for knowledge and transformation. The key part of alchemy in the apothecary's world was the idea of transformation, whether it was healing the body, transmuting metals, or creating life-extending potions. The belief was that all substances contained the potential to change, and the apothecary, using their tools, could unlock that potential. In this sense, the apothecary was both a scientist and a magician, manipulating the elements of the world to create something new. And as strange as it may sound, some of these alchemical processes did in fact lead to the development of actual medicinal treatments, such as alcohol distillation for medicinal tinctures. You can imagine the apothecary eyes squinting as they peer into the flame beneath a glass flask, their hands steady as they mix precise measurements of chemicals, hoping that this time they'll create something revolutionary. Combination of skill patience, and perhaps a bit of desperation. After all, alchemy wasn't always about finding gold. It was about finding the secrets to life, death, and health. The line between a mundane remedy and a magical transformation was thin, and the apothecaries' belief in their own power to change the world was what drove them forward. Historians argue about whether apothecaries truly believed in the magical aspects of alchemy, or whether they simply saw it as an extension of their craft. Was it all part of their larger effort to heal, or did they see it as a way to unlock the very fabric of the universe? What we do know is that alchemy played a central role in apothecary practices, and many of the tools they used were as much about symbolism and belief as they were about practical science. Let's step away from the alchemy and focus on one of the more straightforward yet still essential tools in the apothecary's arsenal, the scale. No, not the kind you use to weigh yourself, though that might be interesting in a medieval context, but rather a finely crafted balance scale typically made of brass or iron. This seemingly simple tool played a crucial role in the apothecary's work. After all, precise measurements were just as important as the ingredients themselves. As the apothecary dips their hand into a jar of dried herbs, their fingers nimbly select just the right amount. Too much, and the remedy might be too potent. Too little, and it might not work at all. The scale, with its finely etched notches and delicate weights, ensures that each ingredient is measured with the utmost precision. Imagine the scene: the apothecary carefully balancing the scale, eyeing to it closely, and then adding just a few more grains of powdered ginger to a small dish. The balance of ingredients isn't just about the amounts, it's about the alchemical harmony, the magical combination that could turn a simple herb into a healing potion. A heavy hand could ruin the delicate balance. Too much of one ingredient could overpower the others. Historians still argue whether the apothecaries of the time fully understood the need for precision in medicine, or whether they relied more on trial and error. The precision with which they worked may not have been based on scientific reasoning, but more on tradition, passed down from apothecary to apprentice. Yet there's no denying the importance of the scale in their daily work. It was a symbol of control, of understanding that the smallest amount of a substance could make all the difference. Whether it was an oil for a headache or a tincture to help with digestion, the balance scale ensured that each remedy was crafted with care, and no ingredient was ever out of place. The use of the scale wasn't just about the medicines, it extended to many of the apothecary's potions and salves. The mixing of herbs, powders, and oils required careful measurement to achieve the right consistency and potency. For something as simple as a balm to soothe chapped skin, or as complex as an elixir meant to rejuvenate the elderly, the apothecary needed to know the perfect balance of ingredients. And while modern science may tell us that there's no magic in these remedies back then, the scale was the apothecary's key to creating that magic. But what's more intriguing about the scale is the role it played in shaping the perception of apothecaries. The scale symbolized not just the apothecary's skill, but also their credibility. A well-balanced scale meant a knowledgeable apothecary, one who understood the importance of detail, precision, and care. It was an essential tool that could be used to both measure and prove the apothecary's expertise. Imagine a client watching the apothecary at work. Each adjustment to the scale, each careful addition of powder, giving them confidence that they were in the hands of a true professional. However, there's also a more humorous side to this. In some cases, the apothecary might use the scale for less than reliable purposes. You see, not all apothecaries were completely trustworthy. Some of them might have been more interested in making a quick profit than in crafting remedies. Historians argue that some apothecaries might have cheated with their scales, either by under-measuring their ingredients or by using false weights. And while this was certainly frowned upon, it also served as a reminder of the trust the public placed in apothecaries. After all, a person's health was in their hands. Still, the scale was a tool that helped establish the apothecary's reputation. Even in the days of herbal mixtures and magical elixirs, the precision of the scale was seen as a sign of skill and expertise. When the apothecary meticulously weighed each ingredient, they were signaling to their customers that they were serious about their craft. It wasn't just about mixing things together. This was about chemistry, even if the apothecary didn't fully understand the science behind it. And in a world where medicine was as much about belief as it was about healing, the use of the scale lent a sense of legitimacy and authority to the apothecary's work. Imagine standing in the shop watching the apothecary place a delicate weight on one side of the scale, watching it tilt just a little before they carefully place their chosen herb on the other side. The feeling in the room is one of focus, of quiet concentration. As they work, the whole world seems to pause. This scale, with its simple yet significant role, is the tool of the trade. A reminder that in the world of 16th century apothecaries, precision could be a matter of life or death. As the apothecary finishes their careful weighing and grinding, they reach for another essential tool in their vast collection, the apothecary knife. Now, this isn't just any knife. It's not your average kitchen tool. The apothecary tool, knife, is a sick-ass bit of a multi-purpose instrument, sleek, sharp, and finely crafted to perform a variety of delicate tasks. From slicing through thick bundles of dried herbs to performing minor surgeries, this knife was indispensable to an apothecary's work. The knife itself was typically small, with a curved, fine blade designed for precision. Imagine the apothecary using it to scrape the last bit of powdered ginger off a stone slab, or cutting the skin of a dried herb, just enough to release its essential oils. The blade would have been carefully maintained, its sharp edge a symbol of the apothecary's skill. This wasn't just a tool for cutting. It was used to prepare ingredients with a delicate hand, to perform surgical procedures like lancing a boil or opening a wound, and to help administer treatments like bloodletting, a practice that, while not always effective, was widely used. In the 16th century, historians still argue about the degree to which apothecaries were responsible for performing surgeries. In many cases, apothecaries were also the local barbers, performing minor surgeries such as tooth extractions, lancing abscesses, or even amputations. The apothecary knife was the tool of choice for these procedures. It was an instrument that symbolized the apothecary's ability to blend the medical with the practical, to heal with both potions and skill. It's hard to imagine, but in the absence of modern surgical tools, this knife could serve to both prepare medicinal remedies and serve as a basic surgical tool for the ill and injured. Now imagine the apothecary carefully wielding their knife, using it to slice into a fresh root or clean the wound of a patient. The scent of herbs fills the air as the apothecary moves with practiced precision, the faint sound of the knife cutting through material accompanied by the murmurs of the patient or the occasional sigh. There's a sense of both calm and urgency in the air, a reminder that the work being done is essential. Whether it's preparing a cure or tending to a wound, this knife wasn't just a tool, it was a symbol of the apothecary's dual role as both a healer and a quasi-surgeon, a practitioner of both the mystical and the practical. Despite its importance, the apothecary knife wasn't always the most glamorous tool. It was often a simple utilitarian piece of equipment, but its presence in the apothecary's toolkit was essential. After all, without the right tool, even the most potent remedy might fail. The knife also had a symbolic role. It was a reminder of the apothecary's connection to both the natural world and the human body. The careful slicing of herbs, the steady hand used in surgical procedures, all pointed to the apothecary's understanding of both science and the ancient art of healing. One of the more fascinating debates among historians is how much surgery and medical treatment were integrated into apothecary practices. Some scholars suggest that apothecaries were highly trained in the use of tools like the apothecary knife, learning techniques from books or from observing more experienced healers. Others argue that apothecaries were more focused on creating medicines and potions, leaving surgical practices to dedicated barber surgeons. But one thing is clear: the knife was a crucial tool in the apothecary's world, representing both skill and versatility. In a time when medicine was as much about belief and tradition as it was about science, you can almost picture the apothecary, their knife in hand, carefully preparing a remedy for a patient who's waiting in the corner. Maybe it's a simple treatment for a cold, maybe it's something far more serious. The knife is steady in their hands, the scent of herbs and medicine mixing in the air as they work. The knife isn't just for cutting, it's for healing, for connecting the apothecary's skill with the person who needs their help most. Now, as the apothecary sets aside their knife, and prepares to move to the next task. Let's take a look at aromatic treatments, a critical, yet often overlooked part of their practice. In the 16th century, the apothecary's shop wasn't just a place for tinctures and potions. It was also a space filled with scents, some sweet, some pungent, and all highly medicinal, aromatic oils and fragrances. Just as important as any herb or mineral, they were used to treat ailments, promote relaxation, and even ward off evil spirits. While today we might associate essential oils with spa treatments in the medieval world, these aromas held far more significance. Imagine stepping into the apothecary's shop and being enveloped by a complex mixture of smells. The heady fragrance of lavender might mix with the sharp scent of rosemary, and the more pungent undertones of something like frankincense or myrrh. The air would be thick with these scents, creating a calming or invigorating atmosphere depending on what the apothecary was trying to achieve. The apothecary might be grinding fresh lavender petals in a mortar, blending them with oil to create a soothing balm for headaches or anxiety. Or perhaps they're preparing an ointment to fight off the plague, blending aromatic herbs that were believed to purify the air and protect against disease. Aromatics were in many ways the foundation of medieval medicine, as they were used not only for their physical effects but also for their spiritual properties. The belief that fragrance could heal or protect was rooted in ancient traditions. In many cultures, incense and aromatic oils were considered sacred, and the apothecary's use of them was not only about health but also about invoking divine protection. Frankincense and myrrh, for example, were prized not just for their calming scents but also for their connection to religious rituals. Burning these substances in the apothecary's shop was believed to purify the space, driving away evil spirits and creating an environment conducive to healing. Historians still argue whether these aromatic treatments were effective in a medicinal sense or if their power lay in the placebo effect. In many cases, the soothing scent of lavender or the invigorating quality of rosemary could have helped ease a patient's nerves, providing comfort and relief, even if the physical effects were minimal. But what's fascinating is how these fragrances played into a much larger cultural context. Fragrances weren't just about health. They were tied to deep-rooted beliefs about the balance between body, mind, and spirit. To inhale a certain scent wasn't just to take in a fragrance. It was to allow the healing properties of the earth itself to enter your body. You might find yourself in the apothecary's shop watching as the apothecary dips a cloth into a small jar of oil. As they rub it onto your temples, the calming scent of lavender fills the air, and suddenly you feel a wave of relaxation wash over you. The apothecary might explain that this oil is for headaches, but you might also feel that it's doing more than that. It's as if the fragrance is clearing your mind, balancing your energy, and soothing your soul. For the people of the 16th century, that sense of relief was just as important as any physical cure. In a way, the aromatic treatments in the apothecary's shop were a precursor to what we now consider aromatherapy. But in those days, there wasn't a distinction between medical and spiritual healing. Both were seen as equally vital to a person's overall well-being. Whether you were using oils to treat a physical ailment or to ward off evil spirits, the goal was the same: to restore balance, to bring healing, and to create a sense of peace. The apothecary's work wasn't just about medicine. It was about creating harmony between the body and the spirit. And the aromatic oils played a crucial role in achieving that. So as you watch the apothecary work, you can almost feel the ancient wisdom of the oils and herbs seeping into your own body, whether you realize it or not. And while the medicinal effects of these treatments may seem quaint by today's standards, there's something undeniably powerful about the way scent can influence our minds and bodies. The apothecary knew this well, and they were masters of using aromas to create a healing atmosphere in their shops, a place where the physical and spiritual could come together in a delicate balance. As the apothecary continues to work, carefully blending their oils and herbs, let's move on to one of their more unconventional tools: the poison. Now, before you get too worried, let me explain. While we might think of poisons today as something purely sinister, in the 16th century, they were a legitimate part of an apothecary's toolkit, used not only for less than friendly purposes but also for medicinal ones. Some poisons were believed to cure ailments. Others were used in very specific medical treatments. And yes, There was always the possibility that they would be used for darker purposes like assassination, but the apothecary's relationship with poisons was complex, and not all of them were harmful. Some, when properly prepared, were considered effective remedies. Imagine, if you will, the apothecary standing over a counter lined with small glass bottles, each containing a potent substance. There's a certain thrill in handling these mysterious liquids. After all, they could cure fevers or, with the wrong dosage, send someone to their grave. It was a fine line to walk. The apothecary may carefully select a tiny vial, one filled with something called arsenic or hemlock, both of which had medicinal properties when used correctly. Though the line between a remedy and a lethal dose was razor thin, in the 16th century apothecaries were often seen as the masters of toxicology, the study of poisons and their effects. They understood that substances like arsenic and mercury, while dangerous, could be used in small amounts to treat ailments like skin diseases or digestive issues. But there was always a risk. Poison was a tool of both healing and harm. It was a tool that required skill, precision, and a deep understanding of the substance's properties. Historians still argue whether apothecaries viewed poisons as necessary parts of their practice, or whether they were more likely to use them in cases of last resort, when other remedies had failed. What's particularly fascinating is the way poisons were sometimes used as part of potions and elixirs that had a more therapeutic goal. Take belladonna, for example, a highly toxic plant that was sometimes used in small doses to treat colic or spasms. It could also be used to induce a state of euphoria or as a sedative, depending on the dosage. Apothecaries would carefully extract the poison from the plant and dilute it in alcohol or water, creating a powerful remedy. While today we'd look at such practices with a sense of horror, in the 16th century, the apothecary's skill with poisons was often seen as a sign of expertise. Of course, poison wasn't always used for healing. Apothecaries were often caught in the middle of the political intrigues of their time. In some cases, poisons were used for more sinister purposes, such as in the case of assassinations or political maneuvering. Wealthy patrons and even royalty sometimes sought out apothecaries to procure poisons that could be used to eliminate rivals. It's rumored that some apothecaries even created secretive concoctions for the purpose of poisoning enemies with the same careful craftsmanship they applied to their medicines. Historians still debate whether this was a widespread practice, but the fact remains that poisons were readily available in apothecary shops, often carefully guarded and stored in locked cabinets. Imagine the apothecary working late into the night, quietly preparing a venomous tincture for a client. The only sound is the soft click of the glass vial as it's sealed. The apothecary looks up at you, perhaps sensing your unease, and offers a small, cryptic smile. They assure you that the potion is perfectly safe for the purposes it's meant for, whether that's to cure a fever, treat an infection, or in some cases bring about a very different kind of remedy. Poisons, in their way, were an essential part of the apothecary's craft, though the line between healer and killer was always blurred. The intriguing thing is that for the apothecary's, poison wasn't necessarily a dangerous tool. It was simply another ingredient to be handled with care, much like any herb or mineral. It was another element of their vast knowledge, and they would often experiment with it as they did with other substances. The apothecary, after all, was someone who worked in the realms of life and death, crafting potions that could heal, that could harm, or that could alter the course of history. Now let's take a moment to explore another tool that plays a huge role in the daily work of an apothecary: bandages and salves. These simple tools might not seem as mysterious or magical as some of the other instruments we discussed, but they were in many ways just as crucial to the apothecary's work. After all, many of the apothecary's clients weren't coming in for a magical potion or a secret elixir. They were coming in with injuries, wounds, burns that needed immediate attention, and in the absence of modern bandages or antiseptics, the apothecary had to rely on the materials and knowledge they had at hand to create their own remedies. Picture yourself in the apothecary's shop once again. You're standing near a wooden counter, where the apothecary is mixing a soothing salve. It's a deep, rich brown color, and as the apothecary works, you catch the faint scent of beeswax and herbs, probably lavender, perhaps a touch of chamomile. This is a salve designed to heal wounds, and the apothecary, is adding just the right balance of ingredients to make it both effective and safe. The warmth from a small fire in the corner of the shop makes the air heavy with the smell of herbs, and the steady sound of the mortar and pestle grinding herbs into a fine powder provides a calming rhythm. With expert hands, the apothecary stirs the mixture, checking the consistency. Once it's ready, the salve is poured into a small jar for easy use. But the salve is just one part of the healing process. Bandages were just as important, and like everything in the apothecary's shop, they weren't simple store-bought products. Apothecaries would often use clean linen or cloth, strips that could be easily cut and applied to a wound. Depending on the injury, they might soak the bandage in an herbal infusion, or use it to apply salves or other treatments directly to the affected area. While these bandages and salves may seem basic by modern standards, they were incredibly important for preventing infections and promoting healing in a world without antibiotics or antiseptics. The apothecary's role was to not only treat the wound, but to ensure that the treatment was as effective as possible in an age where disease was rampant and proper hygiene was often neglected. Historians still debate how effective these remedies truly were. Was the apothecary's knowledge enough to heal wounds, or simply mask symptoms? While we can't know for sure, what we do know is that apothecaries had an intuitive sense of how to treat common injuries. For example, they understood that keeping a wound clean and covered was crucial for preventing further infection. Even if they didn't know exactly what caused infections in the first place, some apothecaries used antiseptic herbs like sage, thyme, or rosemary plants that we now know have mild antibacterial properties to help cleanse wounds. In some cases, these herbs would be infused in oils or made into poultices to apply directly to the skin. The role of bandages and salves also extended to the more cosmetic side of the apothecary's work. Beauty and personal care were also major parts of their trade, and many of the salves they made were used for purposes far beyond treating injuries. Some were used to treat skin conditions like rashes or acne, while others were used to soften the skin or restore its natural glow. The apothecary's work wasn't just about mending broken skin. It was also about helping people look and feel their best. In this way, the apothecary was not just a healer, but a provider of comfort and care in every sense. As you watch the apothecary work, you can see how every tool has its place. The bandages, the salves, the herbs, they're all carefully selected and blended together to create remedies that will help the body heal, whether it's from a simple cut or a more serious injury. And while we might take these remedies for granted today in the 16th century, they were the key to survival. The apothecary's ability to treat wounds and ailments with a mixture of herbal knowledge and practical skill made them invaluable to the community. Without them, many would have been left to suffer in silence. Now that we've seen the apothecary's attention to physical healing, it's time to explore something even more mysterious: instruments of magic. You see, while apothecaries were undoubtedly the keepers of medicine, they were also very much entwined with the pranjas, mystical world of magic. At the time, healing wasn't just about physical remedies, it was also about spiritual protection and ritualistic cures. Many apothecaries believed in the power of charms, amulets, and even divination, and they often incorporated these into their work. These magical instruments were considered vital tools for both diagnosing and treating ailments, and some apothecaries doubled as local wise people, using their knowledge of both plants and the spiritual realm to offer remedies that mixed science and superstition. Picture the scene. The apothecary carefully arranges a collection of curious objects on their workbench. Among the usual jars of herbs and glass vials, there are small amulets made from worn pieces of bone, silver, and gemstones. Some of these amulets were thought to hold protective powers, keeping evil spirits or illnesses at bay. You might see a rune-inscribed charm hanging near the door of the apothecary's shop, meant to ward off the plague, or perhaps a potion of holy water blessed by the local priest, placed carefully in a glass vial. The apothecary might even use these objects as part of their treatments, urging patients to wear a charm or to drink a specific herbal infusion that had been blessed with protective qualities. Many apothecaries, particularly those with a strong interest in alchemy, believed that the use of magical instruments could enhance the healing process. A magical remedy wasn't just about the ingredients, it was about creating the right atmosphere. Apothecaries would use incense to purify the air, or perhaps light a few candles to set the mood, all while murmuring incantations under their breath. Even the way the medicine was administered could be ritualistic, with certain words spoken over the patient to seal the remedy's effectiveness. These apothecaries were as much spiritual guides as they were healers. Historians debate the extent to which apothecaries truly believed in magic versus using it as a way to soothe the minds of their patients. Some scholars believe that apothecaries were fully invested in the spiritual practices they used, seeing themselves as intermediaries between the material and spiritual worlds. Others suggest that the magical elements were simply a tool for comfort and trust. People believed in the power of the charm or incantation, and in turn they felt better. Either way, the magic aspect of the apothecary's toolkit was a huge part of their profession. After all, what was more comforting than knowing that your healer could mix herbs and cast a spell to protect you? As you stand in the apothecary's shop, you might catch a glimpse of one of these magical instruments, a pendant with a small vial of protective herbs hanging just inside the window. It's meant to attract passers-by, showing them that this apothecary is not just a simple healer, but also someone who holds the keys to the unseen world. Perhaps the apothecary even uses this charm themselves, always keeping it close to their person for good luck, or to keep themselves safe from whatever dark forces might linger in their busy, bustling shop. In fact, some apothecaries were even skilled in divination, the practice of predicting the future or diagnosing illness based on more mystical methods. Using crystal balls, tarot cards, or even astrology, these apothecaries would offer readings to their patients, often helping them understand the cause of their ailments. In a spiritual context, whether the apothecary truly believed in these methods or simply used them to provide comfort, their practice of magic added an air of mystery and authority to their work. Interestingly, poisonous plants also often featured in this magical toolkit. In medieval times, belladonna, hemlock, and mandrake weren't just used for medical treatments. They were also believed to be imbued with supernatural powers. Apothecaries' knowledge of these plants allowed them to make potions that could cure, but also protect. And some even believed these plants could serve as keys to communicate with spirits. Imagine a patient coming in with a troubling condition, and the apothecary offers a tincture made with belladonna, not only because it has medicinal properties, but because of its mystical reputation. It wasn't just a medicine, it was a spiritual experience. Historians still debate whether apothecaries truly practiced magic as part of their trade, or if these elements were just an outward expression of their knowledge. Were they tapping into real spiritual forces, or were they simply using the mystical elements of their craft to bring comfort to their patients? One thing is for certain. The apothecary's shop was not just a place for herbs and powders, it was a place where the magical and the medicinal coexisted, creating an environment where healing wasn't just about the body but the mind and spirit too. As we continue our journey through the apothecary's workshop, let's turn our attention to another fascinating aspect of their practice: medieval beauty remedies. Now, you might not immediately associate apothecaries with beauty treatments, but in the 16th century, the apothecary's role extended far beyond curing the sick or healing wounds. In fact, they were often the go-to professionals for all things related to beauty and self-care. Whether you were looking for a potion to clear up your skin, a remedy to make your hair grow longer, or even a perfume to make you smell like a fresh garden, the apothecary had just the right solution. Picture yourself in the shop again, this time standing near a counter covered with small glass jars, each containing a different concoction. The apothecary moves swiftly, their hands skilled in the art of preparation. They pull out a jar filled with rosewater, a popular remedy for all sorts of skin ailments. With a few drops, it could soothe irritated skin, reduce redness, and leave behind a delicate floral scent. The apothecary might explain that it was the ideal solution for both beauty and health, a remedy that worked wonders for the complexion. They might even suggest using it in a delicate facial wash, or mixing it with a few other herbs to create a cleansing tonic for your skin. Alongside the rosewater, there are other more exotic concoctions, Perhaps a jar of almond oil used to soften and moisturize the skin, or a herbal shampoo made from a combination of herbs like lavender and chamomile to refresh and rejuvenate the hair. It wasn't uncommon for apothecaries to craft creams and oils that would be used not only for healing wounds, but also for beautifying the body. These products were highly prized, especially by the wealthy who could afford to pamper themselves with such luxuries. And while today we might find these beauty remedies quaint, they were considered vital. In an age where personal hygiene, self-care were much more limited, historians still debate whether medieval beauty practices were effective or simply superstitions. Many of the ingredients used by apothecaries like rosewater honey and herbal infusions have proven to have some mild beneficial effects on the wardias and the one's skin. But for the apothecaries and their clients, it was more about the ritual and belief in the power of these remedies. There was a certain comfort in knowing that the apothecary had crafted a special potion just for you, something that had been carefully prepared with their own hands and knowledge. It was as much about self-care as it was about trust, trusting that the apothecary knew what they were doing, and that their remedies were effective no matter how bizarre or unconventional they might have seemed. The apothecary's beauty remedies weren't just about making someone look good on the outside, they were also believed to improve one's overall well-being. For example, a soothing facial cream wasn't just for softening the skin, it was also meant to calm the nerves and help the person feel refreshed and rejuvenated. Beauty in the eyes of the 16th century apothecary was deeply intertwined with balance of the body, the spirit, and the soul. If you felt beautiful, you felt healthy. If your skin was radiant, so too was your energy. But let's not forget the more eccentric beauty practices that the apothecary sometimes concocted. You might have heard of a beauty mask made from crushed pearls, or even the bizarre use of dead snail slime in creams believed to reduce wrinkles and make the skin more youthful. Yes, in the apothecary's world there was no shortage of strange beauty treatments that would raise a few eyebrows today. Some of these beauty potions were said to have more mystical properties, perhaps a face cream made from unicorn horn, or at least unicorn horn powder, could ward off evil spirits, while also improving complexion. Whether or not these treatments were effective, they were often a combination of folk remedies, herbal knowledge, and a touch of magic. The beauty practices of the apothecary also reflect the social dynamics of the time. For the wealthy, beauty treatments could become a regular part of their lifestyle, while the common folk would turn to the apothecary's remedies when they had a specific need, such as to treat a skin rash or to freshen up before an important event. No matter the reason, though, the apothecary's knowledge of herbs, oils, and potions made them the gatekeepers of personal care, whether it was for healing or beautifying. As you watch the apothecary carefully prepare one of these beauty remedies, it's easy to see how they were much more than just healers. They were artists in their own right, using the tools of their trade to transform the ordinary into something extraordinary. They took great pride in their craft. Whether it was a cure for a fever or a potion for glowing skin, each jar, each vial, each potion was a testament to their knowledge, their skill, and their dedication to their art. As we come to the final chapters of our journey through the world of 16th century apothecaries, we must take a moment to reflect on the legacy of these early healers and how their tools, practices, and philosophies laid the foundation for modern medicine. You see, while many of the remedies, instruments, and beliefs of the apothecary might seem odd to us, now they were innovative in their own time. They were, after all, pioneers of a kind of medicine that blended empirical observation with spiritual insight, a blend that would eventually give rise to the world of scientific healthcare we know today. As you look around the apothecary's shop one last time, you begin to see how everything fits together: the mortar and pestle, the distillation apparatus, the glass bottles, and the mysterious powders. These were the building blocks of a medical system that was still in its infancy, but one that had the potential to shape the future of healing. Every potion mixed, every herb ground, and every remedy prepared was a small step toward the discovery of better, more effective ways to treat illness. And while some of the treatments used by apothecaries might have been based on superstition, Others laid the groundwork for what would eventually become modern pharmacology. Let's take a moment to consider the significance of the tools of the trade. The mortar and pestle, for example, is still in use today, though it's mostly been replaced by mechanical grinders. But back in the 16th century, it was a vital tool for creating medicines that could ease pain, treat wounds, and improve overall health. Similarly, the distillation process, which was once used to create tinctures, oils, and perfumes, is now an integral part of the chemical industry responsible for producing everything from gasoline to medicine. It's fascinating to think about how these tools, so humble in their origins, eventually became cornerstones of the pharmaceutical world. And then there's the role of the apothecary themselves. The apothecary wasn't just a practitioner of medicine, they were also part of the social fabric of their time. They were the trusted healers, the ones who were sought after not only for their knowledge of herbs and potions, but also for their ability to provide comfort during times of illness or distress. In a way, the apothecary's legacy lives on today in the figure of the pharmacist who combines scientific knowledge with compassion and care. While the apothecary's methods were at times inaccurate or based on questionable beliefs, their commitment to healing, no matter the cost, was genuine, and their influence continues to shape the world of medicine. As we reflect on these early medical practices, we can't help but feel a certain sense of awe for the apothecaries. They were pioneers in their own right, working in a time when medical knowledge was still developing and often shrouded in mystery. They were both healers and magicians, blending ancient remedies with their own knowledge to craft solutions that might help, might harm, or might simply provide a sense of hope. They were artists of their craft, experimenting with ingredients and processes to create new remedies, sometimes by accident, and sometimes through sheer determination. But what about the future of the apothecary's work? What happened to all those strange tools and methods over the centuries? Historians have pointed out that many of the apothecary's practices were eventually replaced by modern medicine. The Brotivisti, rise of chemistry, pharmacology, and scientific medical practices gradually pushed the apothecary out of the spotlight. The apothecary's role, once central to the health of the community, was slowly replaced by the modern pharmacist, a highly trained professional who uses scientifically backed methods and formulations to treat patients. Yet the legacy of the apothecary lives on in our modern pharmacies, where we still see elements of their work. The shelves are stocked with bottles of medicine. The mortar and pestle are still used occasionally for grinding certain compounds, and the role of the pharmacist still echoes the apothecary's commitment to health and healing. So while the world of modern medicine is far more scientific than the apothecary's world ever was, we can still trace a thread from the apothecary's humble shop to the pharmacy counter we visit today. Imagine the apothecary standing at their counter, still surrounded by their tools, mortar and pestle, glass bottles, and vials of strange substances, offering another remedy to another patient. Perhaps they are more confident now, their methods, more refined, but in some ways they are still the same. Healers, blending knowledge, skill, and a bit of magic to help the sick. The apothecary might have been considered a mystic or a charlatan in their time, but today we know that they were laying the groundwork for the healing practices we rely on today. And so, as the modern world continues to evolve, we honor the apothecary's legacy, recognizing that the strange and often mysterious tools they used were not just part of a primitive system of medicine, but part of a genuine effort to improve the human condition, a legacy that still shapes the world of healthcare. Now that we've explored the apothecary's legacy and their strange but essential tools, let's dive into one of the more peculiar practices of the time: the apothecary's role in bloodletting. It might sound almost barbaric to us today, but during the 16th century, bloodletting was considered a core part of medical practice. The idea behind it was based on the ancient belief that diseases were caused by an imbalance of the four humors: blood phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, and that by removing some blood, the apothecary could restore balance to the body. Imagine the scene: you're in the apothecary's shop, and there's an air of quiet anticipation. The patient sits on a stool, their arm exposed, ready for the procedure. The apothecary reaches for their lancet, a small, sharp instrument used to make a small incision in the skin. The goal is to draw out just enough blood to bring balance back to the body. In the corner, you notice a bowl where the blood will collect, and perhaps a wet cloth to stop the bleeding when the procedure is complete. The room is thick with the smell of herbs and medicinal tinctures, but there's an undeniable tension in the air as the apothecary works. The patient, likely anxious, is reassured by the apothecary's confident demeanor. After all, bloodletting was widely practiced and thought to be a reliable treatment for everything from headaches to fevers. As the lancet punctures the skin and the blood begins to flow, the apothecary carefully watches the amount being drawn, making sure not to take too much. The balance of the humors was a delicate matter, and overzealous bloodletting could be as dangerous as having too little. Despite its widespread use, historians still argue whether bloodletting was truly effective in treating illness, or whether it was simply an accepted practice because of its long history. Some apothecaries may have genuinely believed in the power of bloodletting to cure diseases, while others may have performed the procedure as a ritualistic act, relying on the belief that it would work rather than on any empirical evidence. Interestingly, bloodletting wasn't just reserved for serious diseases. It was also commonly used for preventative care. Some patients would visit the apothecary regularly for a small controlled bloodletting to maintain balance in their current bodies, believing it would help them avoid getting sick. In fact, it was not uncommon for people to undergo the procedure, even when they weren't feeling ill, just as a way to keep their humors in check. The apothecary's role was not only to heal the sick, but to maintain the health of the community by ensuring that people's humors remained balanced. Even though bloodletting is now seen as a largely ineffective and dangerous practice, the tools used in the process were far from rudimentary. The lancet was a finely crafted instrument, often made of steel, with an ornate handle reflecting the apothecary's skill in both medical craft and artistry. Cupping and leeches were also sometimes used in conjunction with bloodletting. The process involved placing heated cups on the skin to draw blood, or using leeches to suck out the blood in a more controlled way. These methods, while strange to us now, were seen as effective tools of medical practice at the time, and the apothecary's knowledge of how to apply them correctly was highly valued. Despite the questionable efficacy of bloodletting, it did have a lasting impact on the development of medical tools and techniques. The lancet, for example, remained a vital tool in the apothecary's shop for many years. Though bloodletting fell out of favor in later centuries, the idea of using controlled methods to treat illness remained important. Today, we still use techniques that involve the careful extraction or management of bodily fluids, such as blood tests or dialysis. In that sense, the apothecary's role in early medical procedures, even ones we now regard as ineffective, paved the way for more scientifically grounded methods of treatment. And let's not forget the psychological impact of bloodletting. Even if the treatment wasn't particularly effective, the belief that it would work often provided a sense of relief for the patient. Imagine the sense of trust they had in their apothecary who confidently guided them through the procedure, knowing that it was as much about their mindset as their physical body. Much like the placebo effect we see in modern medicine, the apothecary's confidence in their practices combined with the patient's trust in them often made the treatment feel like it was working even if it wasn't. Historians still debate the psychological and cultural significance of bloodletting. Was it a practice based on a misunderstood theory of medicine, or was it an early attempt to control the body and the unseen forces believed to cause illness? In the case of the apothecary, it's likely a combination of both. Bloodletting was part of a larger worldview, where healing and ritual were inextricably linked, and apothecaries held a unique position as both healers and spiritual guides. As we move away from the more controversial practices of bloodletting and begin to look at the everyday tools the apothecary relied on, let's turn our attention to the humble yet essential bandages and salves tools that every apothecary used but perhaps weren't as glamorous or mystical as some of their more exciting remedies. While it might seem like a small detail, the bandage was the backbone of the apothecary's work, especially when it came to treating wounds and injuries. Imagine yourself once again in the apothecary's shop. The air smells of dried herbs, wood smoke, and the faint comforting scent of beeswax. On the counter before you is a neatly stacked pile of linen strips, the perfect material for bandages. They've been washed, bleached, and cut to size, ready for use on wounds of all kinds. Bandages might seem like a simple thing today, but in the 16th century, they were a highly valued tool in the apothecary's shop. especially when combined with their medicinal salves. The apothecary likely reaches for a jar filled with herbal salve, a mixture of beeswax, olive oil, and medicinal herbs like comfrey or yarrow, which they will carefully spread onto the bandage before applying it to the wound. The salve sero isn't just for its healing properties. It's also used to help the bandage adhere to the skin. The apothecary knew that an effective bandage wasn't just about covering a wound, it was about sealing it, keeping the herbal remedy in place so that it could work its magic. This process of dressing wounds was an essential part of the apothecary's work, as injuries and infections were common in the 16th century. While the medical community at large didn't fully understand bacteria or the true cause of infections, they understood that keeping wounds clean and covered could help in the healing process. This was a time before antibiotics, when wounds could easily become infected, leading to complications that could be fatal. Apothecaries therefore had to be highly skilled in not just treating the wound itself but in preventing infection. They would often use herbs with antibacterial properties in their salves, such as garlic or rosemary. In some cases, they might preventing infection. Add alcohol or vinegar to the mix, substances that were believed to disinfect and cleanse. Though they didn't know the science behind it, these ingredients were effective at helping to protect against the infections that would otherwise overwhelm a person's immune system. You can almost picture the apothecary as they work, taking the time to prepare the bandage with care, ensuring that the salve is evenly spread and the bandage is tightly wound around the injury. The smell of the herbs fills the air, and you can feel the comforting nature of the process. This isn't just about physical healing. It's about the apothecary's belief in their craft, their trust in the herbal remedies they've spent years mastering. The bandages, the salves, and the herbs, they're the apothecary's version of modern medicine, and they take great pride in the tools of their trade. One of the more fascinating debates among historians is how much cultural beliefs played a role in the success or failure of these treatments. Was the apothecary's method effective because of the herbs they used, or because the patient believed in the treatment so strongly that their body responded? In many cases, the placebo effect was just as powerful as the medicine itself. The apothecary, with their confidence and skill, could offer a sense of reassurance to their patients, and this psychological boost may have been just as important as the actual treatment. After all, if a patient believed they were being healed, they were more likely to feel better both physically and mentally. While some of the tools of the apothecary's trade were mysterious or strange, bandages and salves were practical and essential. The fact that these tools have remained staples in modern medicine is a testament to their effectiveness and importance. Even today, we rely on bandages, salves, and antiseptic treatments to care for our wounds, showing just how much the apothecary's methods have shaped modern healthcare. But the story of the apothecary's bandages doesn't end with physical healing. Bandages were also used to provide comfort and psychological relief. Think about it. When a wound is properly bandaged and treated, it signals to the patient that the apothecary has taken care of them, that their injury is being handled with expert care. This act of tending to someone, of dressing their wounds, was an emotional and spiritual experience, as much as it was a physical one. The bandage wasn't just a cover for a wound, it was a symbol of hope and healing, a sign that recovery was possible. As we step back and take a deeper look at the broader scope of the apothecary's work, we come to realize that their shop was more than just a place for medicines and remedies. It was also a laboratory of the unknown. The apothecary's instruments weren't just used for mixing herbs or preparing simple salves. They were tools of experimentation, often blurring the lines between science and magic. Among these tools, one of the most important was the alchemy kit, which in many cases doubled as a laboratory for crafting remedies that could seem to defy explanation. Picture the apothecary in their workshop at night, the flickering light of a candle casting shadows across shelves, filled with odd instruments, glass vials, copper distillation equipment, and strange metallic instruments that you can't quite identify. There's a hum of quiet concentration in the air as they carefully mix ingredients in a flask, their hands steady as they watch the reaction unfold. Some of these concoctions will become medicines, others will remain experiments, and some may even be used for ritualistic purposes. The apothecary standing at their workbench seems almost otherworldly, caught between the ancient world of magic and the dawning age of scientific discovery. It's important to note that during the 16th century, the worlds of alchemy and pharmacy were deeply intertwined. Apothecaries, like many in their profession, were influenced by the ideas of alchemy, the ancient belief that ordinary metals could be transformed into precious ones, and that life's elixir could be created from the right mixture of chemicals. While modern science scoffs at alchemy as a pseudoscience, the apothecary's role in blending alchemy with medicine was part of a wider intellectual movement that eventually led to the development of chemistry and pharmacology. Historians still argue about how much apothecaries truly believed in the mystical powers of their craft, and how much they simply used alchemical tools out of practical necessity. But what's clear is that these instruments allowed the apothecary to delve deeper into the mysteries of medicine, even if they didn't fully understand the science behind it. Some of the apothecary's experiments were rooted in the desire to transform substances, particularly in an attempt to create potions that could heal, preserve life, or even in some cases grant immortality. Take the philosopher's stone for example, a legendary alchemical substance believed to have the power to turn base metals into gold. While we know today that such a substance is fictional, it was something that apothecaries often sought in their work. Whether or not they truly believed in the stone's magical properties, they were continually experimenting with different chemical reactions, trying to discover the elusive secret of transformation. These experiments, while not always successful, were part of the foundation of modern chemical processes. The apothecary's tools of transformation were typically rudimentary by modern standards, but they were capable of producing some fascinating results. Think of the retorts, flasks, and alembics used to distill and separate the essences of plants, minerals, and even animal products. These glass instruments were crucial for the apothecary's work, allowing them to create concentrated tinctures, oils, and other medicinal products. The process was slow and meticulous, involving the careful heating and cooling of ingredients until the desired properties were extracted. It was alchemical precision, mixed with the patient attention of a craftsman, that led to many of the cordiants, healing elixirs, apothecaries sold to their customers. It wasn't just about creating magical potions. These tools were also essential for preserving medicines for later use. Without refrigeration or modern preservatives, apothecaries had to rely on preservation methods like distillation, alcohol, infusions, and sealing jars to ensure that their remedies remained potent. Apothecaries used their knowledge of chemical reactions to preserve herbs, roots, and even animal-based remedies, ensuring they could be used during lean months when fresh ingredients weren't available. The apothecary's work was in many ways a precursor to modern pharmacology. Though they may have believed they were crafting remedies that had mystical properties, they were also engaging in scientific experimentation, often without even scientific experimentation realizing it. The use of distilled extracts, concentrated tinctures, and herbal infusions created by the apothecary paved the way for modern pharmaceuticals. So while we may look back at some of their practices with skepticism today, we cannot deny that they were innovators, working at the edges of what was known, trying to unlock the mysteries of the human body and the natural world. Imagine standing there in the apothecary's workshop, watching as they carefully measure ingredients, making small notes in their ledger about the outcomes of their experiments. They are both a scientist and a magician, standing at the threshold of a new era in medicine. Even if they don't fully realize how their work will lay the foundation for future generations of pharmacists and chemists, the apothecary's work might have been grounded in both practical knowledge and mystical beliefs, but it was also part of the process that eventually brought us into the world of modern medicine, a world where science and magic no longer need to be blended together. As we move into the final stretches of our journey through the fascinating world of the 16th century apothecary, let's take a step back and consider the apprentices, the next generation of apothecaries who would follow in the footsteps of their masters. In many ways, the life of an apprentice in the apothecary's shop was a journey into both the practical and the mystical realms of healing. While apprentices were often tasked with menial chores like grinding herbs or organizing jars, their education went far beyond simple tasks. They were learning the secrets of medicine, the art of healing, and in some cases the arcane practices of magic and alchemy. Picture the scene. An apprentice stands by the side of a seasoned apothecary, carefully watching as their master grinds a mixture of herbs for a patient's remedy. The apprentice's hands are slightly trembling as they prepare the 24th mortar and pestle, trying to mimic their mentor's steady, confident movements. But as the apprentice works, they're also learning something far more valuable than just the mechanical actions of preparation. They're being taught the philosophy of healing. The apothecary isn't just a tradesman. They are a master of both practical science and spiritual practice, and they pass on this knowledge to the apprentices who follow them. Apprenticeships in the 16th century were long and often grueling. It could take years to become a fully trained apothecary, and in that time apprentices learned far more than just how to mix medicines. They were also trained in the art of consultation. Much like modern physicians, apothecaries had to diagnose illnesses and determine the best course of action. But instead of relying on modern medical tests or x-rays, they relied on the ancient art of observational diagnosis, carefully watching the symptoms, listening to the patient's complaints, and using their extensive knowledge of remedies to determine the best treatment. The apprenticeship process wasn't without its challenges. Many apprentices were young, often starting at the age of 12 or 13, and were expected to live with their masters, working long hours. In exchange for room board, training, they weren't just learning medicine. They were also immersing themselves in the apothecary's way of life. For many, this meant spending their youth in a world filled with herbs, alchemical potions, and mysterious rituals. In fact, apprentices often spent years simply observing their masters, learning to handle tools and memorizing the ancient texts on healing and alchemy before they were allowed to make their own medicines or perform even basic treatments. However, it wasn't just the apprentices' skill with medicines that made them valuable. It was also their ability to serve the community. Apothecaries, especially in small villages or towns, were often the first point of contact for those in need of help. They didn't just treat wounds, they listened to their patients, offering advice, comfort, and hope. Apprentices learned the importance of this role, often spending hours talking to patients, offering words of encouragement, and learning to develop a relationship of trust with the people they served. Even though many treatments were based on superstition or unproven remedies, the apprentice's job was to provide a sense of reassurance, something that was just as important as the medicine itself. The apothecary's shop therefore became a kind of school of life where apprentices not only learned the craft of medicine but also the deeper philosophies that guided their work. The apothecary didn't just teach them how to mix tinctures and to make salves. They taught them the sacred duty of healing, the responsibility they had to their patients, and the spiritual role they played in their community. The apothecary's tools, the mortar and pestle, the alchemy kits, the bandages and salves, were all part of this larger education, forming the foundation of what would eventually become modern medical practice. Historians debate whether apprentices were also privy to the more mystical practices of their masters. Some apothecaries may have passed down secret recipes for elixirs of life, or knowledge about spells and charms used in healing, blending their medical expertise with esoteric knowledge. It's also possible that some apprentices were encouraged to study alchemy in their spare time, learning how to transmute base materials into gold, or seeking out the philosopher's stone. These mystical pursuits, though no longer a part of modern medical training, were a core part of an apothecary's education, and often informed their approach to healing. By the end of their apprenticeship, many young men and women had spent years learning how to navigate the world of both medicine and magic. And while not all of them would continue in their apprenticeship, many went on to open their own shops, carrying on the legacy of the apothecary's craft. Some apprentices would embrace the world of science, rejecting the mystical practices of their masters, while others would continue to blend medicine and magic, offering their unique healing services to those in need. As you stand there in the shop watching the apprentice work, you realize that the tradition of healing is far from simple. It is an art that has been passed down for generations, not just through tools and knowledge, but through stories, philosophies, and spiritual practices that have shaped the way we view the world of health and wellness. The apothecary's legacy, passed down through apprentices, is one of dedication, compassion, and a belief that healing isn't just about fixing the body. It's about restoring balance and well-being, both physically and spiritually. As we arrive at the final moments of our journey, Through the intriguing world of 16th century apothecaries, we must take a look at their lasting legacy, how their methods, tools, and beliefs have shaped modern medicine and healthcare. The apothecary's shop, once a place of mysticism, practical medicine, and spiritual healing, has transformed into the modern pharmacy we know today. But the apothecary's influence still lingers in many aspects of our healthcare systems, and even in how we approach healing and well-being. Think about the pharmacy shelves you see today stocked with bottles of pills, ointments, and syrups. While the substances inside are scientifically formulated, their origins can often be traced back to the apothecary's shop where herbs, roots, and plant extracts were first used as remedies. The apothecary, though not a modern scientist, was an early experimenter and innovator blending plant medicine with chemical reactions to create powerful potions. Today, while we have access to more precise and effective treatments, many of the remedies we rely on are built upon the same principles the apothecaries followed centuries ago. But let's not forget that pharmacy wasn't the only legacy of the apothecary. Their role as community healers, often providing the first line of defense against illness, also paved the way for our modern healthcare professionals, from doctors to pharmacists to even mental health counselors. While modern doctors don't prepare tinctures or mix herbs, the trust placed in them by their patients remains. The apothecary's shop, once the heart of a community's healthcare, was replaced by hospitals and clinics. But the relationship between healer and patient, built on trust, care, and dedication, hasn't changed. The apothecary was often a local hero, the one people turned to when they were sick, scared, or in need of guidance. Today, we still rely on pharmacists for advice. But in the 16th century, the apothecary often took on multiple roles: healer, psychologist, and sometimes even spiritual advisor. This multifaceted role as both scientific practitioner and spiritual guide created a strong sense of community around the apothecary's work, whether it was offering a soothing tonic for a cough, creating a protective charm for a sick child, or simply offering a listening ear. The apothecary was a vital part of everyday life. They were an anchor in a world that often felt chaotic and dangerous. One of the most significant ways in which the apothecary's work has influenced modern medicine is in the development of pharmacology. Today, we have clinical trials and scientific methods to determine the effectiveness of medications. But the proverk, many of the ingredients we use today are derived from the same herbs, minerals, and animal-based products that the apothecaries worked with. Think about the use of morphine, once derived from the opium poppy, a substance widely used by apothecaries. Today, morphine is a painkiller used worldwide, but its roots can be traced back to the 16th century, when apothecaries were among the first to experiment with plant-based remedies for pain relief. And though modern pharmacology has far surpassed the apothecary's methods, many of the foundational principles are still at play today. What's perhaps most fascinating is how the apothecary's belief in herbalism continues to influence modern medicine. The use of plant-based remedies is experiencing a resurgence, with many people turning to herbal supplements, essential oils, and natural remedies to improve their health. While these treatments are often regarded with a certain level of skepticism by the scientific community, there's no denying that plants and herbs are still a key component of modern, health practices. Apothecaries, in their own way, were the first holistic healers, using a combination of science, intuition, and spiritual belief to treat the body. Today, many people still seek out natural solutions, echoing the apothecary's blend of science and nature. Another aspect of the apothecary's legacy lies in their ability to experiment. While much of the work done in their shops was based on ancient traditions and trial-and-error methods, the apothecary's willingness to experiment with different ingredients and techniques laid the groundwork for modern pharmaceutical practices. The idea that a healer could try different combinations of herbs, oils, and minerals to treat a variety of ailments is still central to the pharmaceutical industry today. The apothecary was a pioneer in this regard, pushing the boundaries of knowledge and innovation, even when they didn't fully understand the science behind what they were doing. When we look back at the apothecary's tools, practices, and beliefs, We can see how they were both ahead of their time and deeply connected to the world of the past. The apothecary was part of a long tradition of healers who have shaped the course of medicine and healing throughout history. Their legacy is far from forgotten. It lives on in the modern practices of pharmacists, herbalists, and alternative medicine practitioners. They paved the way for the sophisticated medical systems we rely on today, blending the art of healing with an understanding of nature's power to cure. And so, as we bid farewell to the apothecary's shop, we leave with the knowledge that their legacy of healing and experimentation continues to influence the way we think about medicine, though their tools may have been simpler and their beliefs less grounded in modern science. The essence of their work, the desire to heal, to experiment, and to serve their community, still remains a vital part of the healthcare systems we use today.